My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 31 years old, and until last week, I thought my life was finally predictable. Not easy. Law is never easy, but structured, controlled, and mine. For years, I built myself into one of the most reliable defense attorneys in New York City. My reputation was clean, my focus sharp. I wasn't anyone's daughter. I wasn't anyone's orphan child. I was just Ava, the lawyer people trusted to save their lives when everything else fell apart. And then my father walked into my office. The same father who had abandoned me and my mother when I was 9. The same man who had vanished without explanation, leaving my mother to pick up the broken pieces of a family he had shattered. For over 2 decades, his silence was louder than any apology could have been. Now here he was, Daniel Mitchell, sitting across from my desk like a ghost made flesh. His voice was colder than I remembered, hard-edged with desperation, he wouldn't admit. "I'm not asking for a favor, Ava," he said, his gray eyes pinning me in place. "I'm asking you to do your job." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands gripped the edge of my desk until my knuckles turned white. 22 years without him, and he had the audacity to waltz back in and demand my help. "You want me to defend you in court," I finally said, keeping my voice as even as I could. "But let's not pretend this is just about me doing my job. You need my help, Dad. And after everything, after nothing, you think you can just walk in here and demand it?" Daniel didn't flinch, but he shifted slightly in his chair, smoothing the lapel of his expensive suit. His hair was streaked with silver now, but his posture was the same, erect, commanding, like he still wanted to control the room. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's business. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't think you were the best option."
Of course he'd frame it that way.
Daniel Mitchell had always been about transactions, about what people could do for him and what he could get in return. Still, I couldn't ignore it. The faint tremor in his voice, the flicker of something buried under all that arrogance. Guilt? Regret? Or just fear of losing everything he still had left? "I need to think about it," I said finally, my tone firmer than the storm inside me. "If you'll excuse me, I have other clients waiting." He nodded stiffly and stood, straightening his jacket as though putting back on his armor. "Take your time," he said, though the tension in his tone suggested otherwise. He turned toward the door, paused, and added, "But remember, Ava, I'm fighting for my life here." When the door shut, the silence was deafening. The chair he had vacated seemed to hold the weight of everything I had tried so hard to forget. That night, I called Sophia Blake. She had been my mentor since law school, a brilliant litigator turned professor who became the closest thing I had to a maternal figure after my mother passed. "He just showed up, Sophia," I said, pacing the length of my apartment with the case file still clutched in my hand, as if he had every right to ask me for help. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he did. Just, "I need you." On the other end of the line, Sophia sighed. "This is tough, Ava. But remember, you're a lawyer first. The question isn't whether you owe him anything. The question is, can you separate your personal feelings from your professional obligation?" I stopped at the window, staring out at the glowing city lights. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm not sure I have a choice." Over the next few days, I buried myself in the thick case file Daniel had left behind. It was worse than I expected. He was being accused of embezzling millions from his own company, Mitchell and Sloan Investments, and the evidence wasn't exactly in his favor. Bank transfers, falsified reports, discrepancies in financial records, all of it pointed directly at him. On paper, Daniel Mitchell was guilty beyond question. But something didn't add up. The transactions were too precise, too deliberate. My father had been many things: reckless, selfish, careless, but never meticulous. This wasn't his style. He wasn't a man who planned for years, who covered his tracks in detail. He was impulsive. Always had been. So, who had the mind for this kind of scheme? That's when one name kept surfacing: Victor Kane. His business partner. His supposed ally. A man whose name appeared in documents just enough to matter, but not enough to stand out. And the more I dug, the more I realized if Daniel fell, Victor stood to gain everything. Late one night, after hours of reading and rereading financial records until the numbers blurred together, I called Sophia again. "This case doesn't add up," I said, exhaustion heavy in my voice. "I think someone set him up. Maybe Victor Kane." There was silence on the line for a beat. Then Sophia said, "If that's true, Ava, you're not just defending your father. You're exposing something much bigger. Are you ready for what that means?" I pressed my hand against the window pane, the city a blur of neon and noise beneath me. "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered, "but I think I have to do this." The next morning, I called Daniel. "I'll take the case," I told him. "But under one condition, I run it my way. No interference. No lies. No half-truths. You answer every question I ask, honestly. If you can't agree to that, find another lawyer." To my surprise, he agreed without argument. But in his voice, I could hear the tension. Maybe he realized he didn't have another option. Maybe he finally understood how serious this was. The first time we met to prepare, the air between us was thick enough to choke on. He sat across from me, his body rigid, his eyes hard. I kept it professional, walking him through the basics of the strategy. I told myself this wasn't personal. This was just another case. Halfway through, though, he broke the silence. "You're good at this," he said, almost reluctantly. I didn't expect this level of confidence. I froze for a second. Was that supposed to be a compliment? A backhanded one? "I've been doing this a long time," I said coolly. "It's what I do." He nodded, looking away. The moment passed, but it lingered like smoke in the air. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. The war inside me had begun. Every time I looked at Daniel Mitchell, I saw two men. The absent father who left me and my mother to struggle alone, and the client whose life now depended on me. And I had no idea which one I wanted to save. The courthouse always smelled the same. Polished wood, old paper, and a faint trace of coffee brewed too long ago. It was a place where lives were torn apart and stitched back together, though never quite the same. As I walked through the marble halls that morning, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what I had agreed to take on. Defending my father wasn't just another case. It was a storm that had been waiting for me my whole life. Building the case. The days that followed our uneasy truce were a blur of documents, late-night calls, and constant frustration. My small team at the firm barely had time to breathe. Every file related to Mitchell and Sloan investments was dragged out of archives, cross-checked, and dissected. At first, the evidence was suffocating. Transfers worth millions carried Daniel's digital signature. Audit reports bore his approval. Internal memos with his initials authorized questionable deals. To an outsider, he was guilty, open and shut. But the closer I looked, the less natural it seemed. The signatures were flawless, too flawless. Almost traced. The approvals were issued at strange hours, sometimes when I knew he was out of the country. And the memos? They read like someone imitating his curt, no-nonsense style. Close enough to pass, but not quite. I needed to see the cracks. And someone had gone to great lengths to fill them. Conversations with Daniel. One night, as the city thundered with summer storms, I confronted him in my office. The fluorescent light cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older than I remembered. "Tell me the truth," I demanded, tossing a stack of bank statements onto the table between us. "Did you authorize these transfers? Yes or no?" He leaned back, his jaw tight.
"No."
"I've never seen those documents before." "Then why does every single trail lead to you?" I snapped. Every account, every false report, it all screams Daniel Mitchell. His eyes narrowed, the way they used to when I was a child asking questions he didn't want to answer. Because someone wants it to. Because whoever did this knew I'd be the perfect target. I studied him, searching for the twitch of a lie. But what I saw was desperation, and a flash of fear. For the first time, I began to believe him. Victor Kane. If Daniel was the perfect target, then Victor Kane was the perfect survivor. Sleek, charming, with the kind of smile that belonged on the cover of Forbes, He had been Daniel's partner for nearly 15 years. Together, they had built Mitchell and Sloan Investments into one of the city's most trusted firms. At least, that was the story they told the world. But Kane's name threaded its way through too many of the files I was reviewing. Minor authorizations here, a signature there. Always peripheral, never central. Always close enough to Daniel to tie them together, but never enough to taint him directly. When I requested his deposition, his lawyer stalled. Scheduling conflicts, urgent travel, missing paperwork. Red flags waving in unison. When he finally appeared, his performance was flawless. The deposition. The conference room buzzed with tension. Kane sat across from me, his navy suit tailored to perfection, his cufflinks gleaming. He smiled as if this were a friendly lunch, not a sworn deposition. "Mr. Kane," I began, my tone clipped. "Can you explain your role in the financial decisions made during the fiscal year in question?" "Of course," he said smoothly. "As Daniel's partner, I oversaw strategic investments. But the financial controls were largely his responsibility. Daniel liked having full authority." A subtle jab. Conveniently vague. "And what about these transfers?" I slid the documents across the table. "Funds moved into offshore accounts. Did you authorize them?" His smile didn't waver.
No.
That would have been Daniel's purview. I trusted him with such matters. I pressed harder. "Did you benefit financially from these transfers?" He chuckled softly. "I assure you, Ms. Mitchell, I had no knowledge of any impropriety. If Daniel made mistakes, I'm as shocked as anyone." The way he said my last name, Mitchell, was deliberate. A reminder. A taunt. By the end of the deposition, I had nothing solid. But his calm, calculated answers gnawed at me. He was too polished, too rehearsed. I left the room knowing he was lying. I just couldn't prove it, yet. Sophia's warning. That night, I met Sophia Blake at her favorite cafe. She listened quietly as I vented, her hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea. "He's slippery," I told her. "Every answer is rehearsed. Every word points back to Daniel. That's what makes him dangerous," she said softly. "A man like Victor Kane doesn't leave loose ends." "So, how do I catch him?" I asked. She studied me for a long moment, by looking where no one else has. "If Kane set this up, he didn't just move money, he built a story. And stories leave traces. Find the piece that doesn't belong, and the whole thing unravels." Her words stayed with me long after I left. Flashbacks. As I worked through the endless files, my mind kept drifting back to my childhood. To nights when my mother sat at the kitchen table, unpaid bills spread before her, tears glistening in her eyes. To birthdays when I blew out candles with only silence in the chair where my father should have been. And now here I was defending him, fighting for him, the same man who left us with nothing. The irony was cruel, but the truth was even crueler. If Victor Kane had orchestrated this, then my father wasn't just guilty of neglect, he was guilty of being a fool who trusted the wrong man. The witness. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Her name was Harper Collins, a senior manager at Mitchell and Sloan. I had flagged her for questioning, mostly as background. But when she walked into the room, her eyes darted nervously, and I knew she was carrying something heavier than routine testimony. At first, her answers were mechanical. Yes, she handled compliance reports. Yes, she had access to financial records. No, she had never seen anything unusual. But when I pressed about Kane, something shifted. "Miss Collins," I said carefully, "have you ever overheard Mr. Kane discussing these financial discrepancies?" Her lips parted, then closed. Her hands twisted in her lap. "There was a call," she whispered finally. "A few months ago. I overheard him saying that Daniel was the perfect scapegoat." The room went silent. My pen froze over the page. "You're certain of this?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She nodded. "I didn't report it. I wasn't sure what to do, but it's been eating at me." Her words hit me like a thunderclap. For the first time, I had something fragile, but something that pointed the finger at Kane. The turning point. That night, I sat alone in my office, the city humming outside my window. Harper's testimony was explosive, but it wasn't enough. Kane would bury it under claims of hearsay, dismiss it as a misunderstanding. I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. As I stared at the stack of files, exhaustion pulling at my bones, a thought crystallized. If Kane had built this story, then somewhere, hidden in the digital dust, there was a thread he hadn't managed to cut. And I was going to find it, no matter what it cost me. The city never really sleeps, but at 3 a.m, even New York grows quieter. My office was drenched in the pale glow of my desk lamp, walls lined with towers of files, sticky notes, and case law references. I should have been exhausted, but adrenaline and obsession kept me wide awake. Somewhere inside these endless records, there had to be a fracture. A hidden trail that Victor Kane hadn't managed to erase. The digital dust. I wasn't a forensic accountant, but I knew how to read patterns. Transactions, signatures, timestamps, these were more than numbers. They were fingerprints. Hours of combing through records led me nowhere. Transfers from one account to another, signed off under my father's name, airtight. But then something caught my eye, an internal email from 2 years ago. Daniel had allegedly approved a wire transfer at 3:47 a.m.
New York time.
Except he wasn't even in the country then. I remembered seeing a photo earlier in the file, Daniel at a corporate gala in London the same night. The event's official schedule placed him on stage at 8 p.m. London time, which meant 3 a.m. New York was 8 a.m. London. Daniel was speaking on stage, giving a keynote, when his account supposedly authorized a transfer halfway across the world. The next day, I called HarperCollins back into my office. She looked pale, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her handbag. "You understand what you told me is explosive," I said. "If you're willing to testify, you could be the key to dismantling Kane's entire facade." Her eyes darted nervously. "I'm scared, Ava. Victor isn't just powerful, he's dangerous. He has connections everywhere. If I go up against him, I'll lose my job. Maybe worse." I softened my voice. "I won't let anything happen to you, but you need to trust me. This isn't just about clearing my father's name. It's about exposing the truth." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll testify, but I need protection." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope flicker to life. Father and daughter. That evening, I went to see Daniel at his penthouse. It was strange walking through the luxury he had built for himself, knowing how little of it had touched my childhood. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to me like it was some kind of olive branch. "You look tired," he said gruffly. "I am," I admitted. "But I found something. Proof that one of the transfers you supposedly authorized couldn't have been you. You were in London giving a speech." A shadow of relief passed over his face. Finally, something real. I studied him, my anger and duty at war. "Why didn't you ever fight for me? For Mom? You fought for your company, for your reputation, for money. But never for us." The question hung heavy in the air. For a long moment, Daniel just stared at the amber liquid in his glass. Then he said quietly, "Because I was a coward. And because I thought staying away would hurt less than showing up broken." The words cracked something in me, but they didn't heal it. Not yet. Sophia's counsel. Later, I met with Sophia Blake, laying out the forged authorization and Harper's testimony. She listened intently, her sharp mind already turning gears.
"This is good," she said.
"But you need more. A forged signature proves manipulation, but you have to connect it directly to Kane. Otherwise, his lawyers will spin it as the work of some anonymous hacker or rogue employee." I rubbed my temples. "So, I need the smoking gun. Something that ties Kane's hands directly to the fraud." Sophia leaned forward. "Think like him. If he orchestrated this, he left something behind. Not because he's sloppy, but because ego always leaves fingerprints." Her words stuck in my head like a mantra, cracking the trail. For days, I dug deeper. I hired a digital forensics expert, a young genius named Amir, who specialized in uncovering hidden metadata. Together, we pored over email headers, server logs, and archived backups that Mitchell and Sloan's IT department didn't even realize still existed. And then, buried in a cache of outdated backups, we found it. An email chain between Victor Kane and an offshore banking contact. The messages were encrypted, but the metadata revealed their origin. The IP addresses matched Kane's personal device. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the suspicious transfers. He hadn't just set Daniel up, he had done it from his own phone. My chest tightened as I realized what this meant. I had the thread. If I pulled it hard enough, the entire web would collapse. Kane's shadow. But Kane wasn't blind. The closer I got, the more he seemed to loom everywhere. Black cars parked outside my apartment too long. Strange calls that ended the moment I answered. Files in my office subtly shifted when no one should have been there. One evening, as I left the courthouse, I saw him across the street. Victor Kane, standing in the shadows, a faint smile curving his lips as he lit a cigar. He didn't approach, didn't speak. He just watched me. It wasn't a threat. It was a message. I know you're coming for me. And I'm not afraid. But I was. The breaking point. The pressure built until it cracked open inside me. One night, after hours of work, I broke down in my apartment. Papers scattered across the floor, Harper's trembling words echoing in my head, Daniel's confession of cowardice replaying like a broken record. I wanted to quit, to walk away from all of it. But then I remembered my mother's face, the exhaustion, the quiet strength, the way she carried both of us after he left. And I knew I couldn't stop.
Not now.
This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. This was about truth, about power, about refusing to let men like Victor Kane write the narrative while everyone else suffered. The strategy. The next morning, I called Sophia. My voice was steady now, no longer trembling. "I've got what we need," I said. Metadata linking Kane to offshore accounts. Harper ready to testify. And the forged signatures proving Daniel was set up. Sophia's voice was calm, but I could hear the fire in it. "Then it's time to corner him. Piece by piece. You're not just defending your father anymore, Ava. You're dismantling Kane's empire." And for the first time since this all began, I believed I could. The courtroom was a battlefield. Not with swords or guns, but with words, evidence, and the unyielding weight of justice. The wood-paneled walls echoed with tension as reporters filled the gallery, their pens poised, their cameras ready. Everyone wanted to see if Daniel Mitchell, once a titan of Wall Street, now branded a criminal, would fall. And I, his estranged daughter, stood between him and ruin. Opening statements. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen Holt, opened first. Her words were razor-edged, slicing through the air with certainty. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. The defendant, Daniel Mitchell, embezzled millions from his own company. The paper trail is undeniable. The evidence will show a man who abused his power, betrayed his employees, and lined his pockets with stolen wealth." Her confidence filled the room. Some jurors nodded. Others scribbled notes. Then it was my turn. I rose, heels clicking against the polished floor, every eye on me. "The prosecution will tell you this case is simple," I began, my voice steady. "But the truth is rarely simple. The truth is buried, sometimes beneath lies, sometimes beneath betrayal. You will see documents. You will see signatures. But what you won't see is the man behind them. Daniel Mitchell didn't embezzle these funds. He was framed. And when we follow the evidence to the end, you'll see who really profited, his business partner, Victor Kane." A ripple went through the gallery at the name. Kane sat smugly behind the prosecution's table, his suit impeccable, his smile sharp. The war had begun. Harper takes the stand. The first days of trial were brutal. Document after document was presented by the prosecution, each one tying Daniel's name to theft. The jury's eyes grew heavy with repetition, signatures, bank accounts, offshore transfers. But then came my chance. Defense calls Harper Collins to the stand. Harper walked nervously to the witness box, her hands trembling as she swore the oath. She avoided Kane's eyes, focusing on me like I was the only anchor in the storm. I approached gently. Miss Collins, can you tell the court about your position at Mitchell and Sloan? She explained her role, her work with compliance, her access to reports. I let the foundation build slowly, carefully. Then I asked the question that shifted everything. Did you ever hear Mr. Victor Kane speak about these financial discrepancies? A hush fell. Harper's voice shook, but it was clear.
Yes.
I overheard him on a phone call. He said Daniel was the perfect scapegoat. The courtroom exploded in whispers. The judge banged his gavel, demanding silence. Karen Holt shot to her feet, objecting. Hearsay. I was ready. Your Honor, this statement falls under the Declaration Against Interest Exception. Mr. Kane's words directly implicate him in the scheme. The jury deserves to hear it. The judge considered, then nodded. Overruled. The testimony stands. Victor Kane's smile faltered for the first time. The forensic proof. But I knew Harper's words alone wouldn't be enough. Kane was too powerful, too careful. I needed the knife that cut through all his defenses. So I called Amir, the digital forensics expert, to the stand. He explained the metadata, the hidden logs, the IP addresses traced back to Kane's personal device. Step by step, he unraveled the threads until the picture was undeniable. Kane had orchestrated the transfers from his own phone. When I displayed the enlarged metadata on the projector, the jury leaned forward, eyes wide. This, Amir said firmly, pointing at the screen, is proof that the fraudulent transfers came from Mr. Kane's device, not Daniel Mitchell's. The gallery erupted again. This time, the whispers carried disbelief and anger. Kane's undoing. The prosecution scrambled. Holt tried to discredit Amir, tried to suggest the data could have been manipulated. But the chain of custody was airtight. Every timestamp, every log, every backup corroborated the same story. Finally, I requested Kane himself be called to the stand. Holt objected, but the judge allowed it. Victor Kane walked to the witness box like a man untouchable, his confidence oozing from every step. But I was ready to strip it away. Mr. Kane, I began, pacing slowly. Do you deny sending these communications to offshore banking contacts? I do, he said smoothly. I've never authorized any such thing. Then explain why your personal device appears in the metadata of these transactions. He leaned back, smiling faintly. Anyone could have spoofed my device. Technology is tricky, Ms. Mitchell. I nodded as if considering. Then I pulled out the final weapon. An internal memo, one Kane had signed months earlier, authorizing an IT update that disabled certain logs. Except the backup Amir had found preserved them. You tried to erase the trail, didn't you? I asked, my voice sharp. You thought deleting logs would bury your fingerprints, but you forgot the backups. Isn't it true, Mr. Kane, that you orchestrated this entire scheme and used my father as your scapegoat? For the first time, sweat glistened at his temple. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence was deafening. The jury saw it. The mask had cracked. Closing arguments. By the time we reached closing arguments, the tide had shifted. Holt was still fierce, but her certainty had been shaken. Even if Kane was involved, she argued, the defendant still bears responsibility for oversight. I rose, my voice carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every memory of abandonment, every flicker of hope. Daniel Mitchell is not a perfect man. He made mistakes, mistakes as a father, mistakes as a husband. But being imperfect does not make him guilty of crimes he did not commit. The evidence shows he was framed. The metadata shows who orchestrated this fraud. The testimony shows who called him the perfect scapegoat. That man is Victor Kane. And today, the truth is no longer buried. It is here, in front of you. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the jury. Justice isn't about punishing the easiest target. It's about finding the truth. And I trust you will. The verdict. The jury deliberated for hours. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Daniel sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly, his usual arrogance stripped away. For once, he looked like what he was, a man at the mercy of others. When the jury filed back in, my heart pounded. On the charge of embezzlement, the foreperson said, "We find the defendant, Daniel Mitchell, not guilty." The words rang like thunder. Relief crashed over me, almost knocking me breathless. The gallery erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted. Holt's face hardened. Kane's mask shattered completely as federal agents approached to arrest him on new charges of fraud and conspiracy. It was over. Father and daughter. After the courtroom emptied, Daniel turned to me. His eyes were wet, something I'd never seen. "You saved my life," he said hoarsely. "I don't deserve it, Ava. But thank you." I held his gaze, emotions warring inside me. "You're right. You don't deserve it. Not as a father, but as a client. You deserved the truth." He nodded, accepting the blow. For once, he didn't argue. We stood in silence, two broken people bound not by forgiveness, but by survival. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now.
Epilogue.
Weeks later, headlines blared. Victor Kane exposed in multi-million-dollar fraud. HarperCollins testified further, protected under whistleblower laws. Sophia Blake sent me a simple note. "Proud of you."
And Daniel?
He disappeared from the spotlight again, this time with the weight of redemption heavy on his shoulders. As for me, I returned to my office. My desk piled high with new cases, new clients, new battles. But something had changed. I wasn't just Ava Mitchell, defense attorney. I was the woman who had faced her past, unearthed the truth, and survived. And for the first time, I felt free. And with that, our story comes to an end, but the real story begins with your thoughts. What would you do if you were in this situation? Let me know in the comments.